Hello, everyone. I had such luck. Hello, everyone. I'm David Pointing. I'm the CEO of the Australian Power Institute. Lovely to have you joining us for the second last session in our first ever Students in Power online summit. If this is your first session with us, really nice to have you here. And if you've joined us in the other sessions, great. And this one's going to be a little bit different because this one we're focusing on diversity and how that links to the student placement experience. So the way that this session is going to run is first we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping that I'll flick through some slides. We're then going to have one featured speaker because unfortunately one of our other speakers at the very last minute has had an issue that they have to deal with, but that's professional life these days, isn't it? And then we really want to have sharing from the community of people. So I'll just kick off with my housekeeping. And the very first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters upon which we are meeting all around Australia today. As a national organisation, we have members everywhere and peoples everywhere. So we're covering all of our great nation. And to acknowledge their emerging, or their elders, past, present and emerging, and the continuing contribution that the Indigenous community makes to Australian community and to the Australian power sector in particular. And also to share, if you're not aware, that this year the API has a new collaboration with the organisation Career Trackers Indigenous Internships, and we have some of their students joining us in the summit with our bursary students as part of this new collaboration. So welcome to any of those students or stakeholders from Career Trackers who are with us, and great to have you. So practical matters, we are recording this session. We've recorded all of our other sessions as well, both so people who can't join us live can check in and get the insights from all of us, but also so we can take notes and draw out some of those learnings, and we'll then be sharing some written reports and other things with people. So what we share today will benefit us, but we'll also make more use of that. Other housekeeping, when we have our featured speaker on, because of the way Teams works, it'd be preferable if people turned off their cameras, because otherwise Teams shows everyone that's got their camera on equally. But once we have our discussion session, it'd be great to have everyone turn on their camera and simulate that live sharing in the meeting room type experience. And as always, remember to mute your microphone if you can. So just to recap on our program, we've had 3 live days of activities that have ranged from us meeting with our bursary students about their experiences, 2 sessions featuring some industry professionals from our member organisations, and now we have this diversity session. But also straight after this, we're also having our close. We're announcing the winners of the student video competition, where we had around 30 students submit videos during the program. So if you want to catch any of the recordings, including this session or those student videos, go to the Summit website and you can see that student videos and replays link, and you can access them there. But this session today is all about supporting diversity through the student experience. And one of the things I wanted to focus on is, I suppose, exploring what diversity means and why we're talking particularly in the context of student placement. So, of course, firstly, why diversity? I know that we probably all know these things, but I think it's important to reiterate. Number one, engineering, power sector, we know that we need more skilled professionals. So, where are we going to get them from? Well, we've got a whole diverse Australian community and an international community. They're a potential source of our skilled workforce. Also, we have a moral obligation to make sure that everyone feels included in our workforce. And at the moment, in some ways, we're not quite there. We need a diversity of thinking with our power sector's challenges and opportunities. And so the best way to get a diversity of great solutions is to have a diversity of people in all of that breadth to come up with the solutions that we're going to need. Number 4 is we serve our communities. and our communities are quite diverse. So really our workforce in the power sector should be, representative or equivalent to the diverse communities that we serve. And number 5, the business side, there is really well documented evidence that a diverse workforce yields very significant benefits for organisations, whether it's pure economics or productive or impact on our mission. A diverse workforce is proven many times to be better for the organisation. So there's many reasons why we want to be diverse, and also, particularly some of our younger students, we might be talking about, well, what is diverse and inclusive? And we know that diversity can be and is many things, whether it's demographic or knowledge or cognitive preferences, but also we know that we typically, or that's probably not the right word, but at the moment for many organisations there's a strong emphasis on some particular elements of diversity in the demographics of our workforce. In particular, for the API, our focus is on Indigenous participation and on increasing the participation of women in the power sector workforce. But that's not our only interest, and we're certainly interested in the full breadth and benefit of diversity in our workforce. But we do tend to focus on Indigenous and female. So we're talking about diversity in this summer in the context of student placements, and I just wanted to give some reasoning for that. So 5 reasons. One is that student placements are, by intent, are very impactful on undergraduate students. So, because the practical experience embeds their learning. That's the real reason we do it. It can really inspire them to go back to uni for their 3rd year and their 4th year or their final year and really focus on a particular stream of their studies, which will very much influence their future career direction. So power engineering in particular is something that we want more students to do, and the placements that they have can very much shape whether they choose that path or not. So a placement really shapes career decisions, and therefore the experiences that students have on that placement will shape the success or not of them joining the power sector's diverse workforce. We know that experiences in industry also are very impactful on shaping what we call future self perceptions. Be what you can see, or be what you feel included to do. So overall, industry placements, they really set the foundations for an individual's career pathway, but it also sets the foundations for their future professional behaviours and attitudes and cultures, because that's their first taste of what is the workplace to be like. So we know that placements do impact all students, not just, Indigenous students or female students, but in fact every student that has a placement is picking up a whole range of things from that placement that will influence their personal stance and position and impact of diversity, but also the impact that they might carry forward as they start their career. So this is not just opinion, it's researched facts, so to speak. So for example, in the engineering education community, a colleague of mine, Sally Mail, about 5 years ago, published some research that looked specifically at the impact of work placements on gender inclusivity. So how do female students interact, and what perceptions do they get coming out of a placement? So to quote Sally and Kara's research, we know that unfortunately, women are underrepresented in society, and studies show that, unfortunately, many of our engineering workplaces have features that are not gender inclusive, and we could probably extend that to not inclusive in other elements of diversity as well. So as we put more effort into getting girls to go into engineering and therefore into power sector workplaces, we could also be creating non-inclusive student experiences as Sally creates it. And from their research, that was a pilot, they discovered that students encountered gendered encounters in their workplace, and these did have impacts on their future perceptions and their future directions, both positive and negative, towards career paths based on the experience that they had. And that they did report, female students did report having marginalising gendered encounters. So it certainly is having an impact and can have an impact both on female students, but also on other students and their attitudes towards diversity issues. But what we want to do today is not to dig into some of the negative experiences or the gendered encounters that students may be having, but actually to look at the positives and to say, well, what are workplaces doing from the experience of students who've been in workplaces with positive actions and examples, or what are some of our member organisations doing to actually proactively address achieving a more diverse and inclusive workplace, particularly in the context of when we have students with us over the summer, this really impactful but short-term transition. When we have custody of these students for 3 months over the summer, what can we do to make sure that experience is positive? So we have two speakers, but unfortunately Amanda is unable to join us at the last moment. But Amanda was at Transcript, or sorry, she is at Transcript, and she's a diversity, inclusion and wellbeing coordinator at Transcript. And importantly, she's also an alumni of the Career Trackers Indigenous Internship Program. So Amanda was going to join us and speak about what Transcript is doing with Career Trackers and the practical application of that in their workplace. But we are joined by Kim Cassidy from Energy Queensland, who is their Principal Advisor for Strategic Workforce Capability. So we do a lot with Kim and Liz and their team, both for through Energy Queensland. We support the UQ Women in Engineering program, but also Kim's also doing a lot with Career Trackers and their Indigenous internship program. So I might just pass to Kim in a moment, and then we'll have some practical positive discussions of what other people are doing, those on the line. So please think about some examples that you might share. I know Kendall emailed you earlier. And then I just wanted to acknowledge who our different partners are across the API, who not only make this summit possible, but also provided the experiences of the students in the summit over the summer, and who are all committed to these issues, such as increasing the diversity and inclusivity of the power sector workforce. So I'm going to stop with the slideshow now, and over to you, Kim, to share what Energy Queensland's doing and what you and your team are doing.
Thanks, David. So probably I'll start big and then I'll sort of hone in specifically on some particular initiatives. But the reason why I did want to sort of share why we're going big at Energy Queensland when it comes to engineering development and more broadly now sort of the STEM development, we have a specific governing committee that focuses on engineering development with representatives from across the different areas within our divisions within our business, and also bringing together a diverse thinking as well. So it consists of members in different engineering disciplines, in regionality, in gender, and also outside of engineering skill sets. So that in itself has been a really important piece in having I suppose some ownership and some drive by a group to outwork diversity or changes in initiatives or the way in which we do things in order to build that more diverse experience and bring more diverse students and ultimately graduates and power professionals to the organisation. So as an outcome of that, one of the things specifically we've focused on, we've got a subgroup that is a subgroup called Reflective Engineering of our community. So it links back to a lot of what you had mentioned before, David, around what is diversity and what is diversity and inclusion, and more specifically, it is about focusing on the fact that for Energy Queensland, we cover 98% or more of the state, right from the Torres Strait down to Tweed Heads and throughout and right out west as well. So you can imagine that it's a very diverse customer base, community base, employee base. So that subgroup specifically has been focusing on, well, when it comes to engineering development or STEM development in our organisation, what are the things that we should be focusing on? So in the last 12 months, that group has sort of set a bit of a purpose and said, well, the things that we do or the opportunities that we have, let's make sure that they're intentional and they're actually bringing around about the right diverse outcomes. So there's a few things that we're doing in this space, some more bigger than others. And one of those is the career trackers, which I'll talk to in a moment. But it also, some of the, I suppose, the key principles have been when it comes to any of our sponsorships. We work closely with Liz Kenrick, who's a colleague of mine. She sort of is our sponsorship and community engagement partner. That we're actually, when we get requests for sponsorships or funding or anything like that from the community or universities or student societies or any of those sorts of things, we actually have a link back to going, what is this actually going to bring about the right outcomes for us in relation to diversity from a region perspective, diversity from a gender perspective, diversity from a First Nations perspective, and also from a discipline perspective as well, knowing that as an energy provider, we need a diverse range of skill sets. So having that to back and carry our sponsorships back to, as well as also our paid student placement experiences as well. So that gives us more opportunity in the bursary process as such to actually go, which students are we going to be able to provide the right experiences to, but also which of these students are actually going to bring a diverse range of thinking to us as a business. And also covering that regional footprint as well. And then more specifically in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've been working with career trackers, as we mentioned. So career trackers have been a great organisation to work with. When we look at, I don't have the specific stats, and I don't know whether you have it at all, David, but when we look at in the engineering discipline, when it comes to university students, there's a real, very, very low percentage of students that identify as First Nations, and there's a multitude of reasons why that is, and it wasn't too dissimilar for females that long ago. And I know the industry has put a lot of work in building the pipeline of females into the STEM university degrees. Career trackers are working with themselves and other organisations to do exactly that, with targeting the First Nations. So with that, we've now, this year over the summer, we had 3 career trackers interns join us. One intern, he actually joined us for a second time, and 2 brand new ones as well, who have also been connected up with the API community. I'll pause there for a second, David. There's a lot of information, so I'll stop if there's anything in particular you want me to delve into a bit more.
Thank you very much, Kim. I suppose a practical question I would have is, so you mentioned having Ashley and Gullah and others. When you're including a deliberate effort to get a more diverse workforce, whether it's First Nations or female or regional, are there any particular efforts that you go to in addition to what you would do from typical student from Brisbane, or is it embedded within your whole process now? But are there particular actions that you've now introduced to make sure that when you get some new students who are almost by design not similar to most of your other workforce, how do you manage that inclusivity element?
Yeah, good question. So we, from an inclusivity perspective, we have a cohort of students that join us every year. So our students come together. We call them orientation sessions. So they're all brought together, so they're all as part of one team. So we know that being a student can be quite daunting, but they're all brought together to feel part of their own student team and be included, no matter what location they're in, what location, gender, whether they're First Nations, or it doesn't paid or unpaid. They are all supported through some activities that we do through that. So that helps them feel included from a student perspective. I think the other really important part is that partnering them or placing them with the right supervisors within the business that are able to put that time aside to coach, support, and help them feel included, because we're talking 30 to 40 students that we're taking, so we rely heavily on the supervisors to do a lot of that. So we also specifically do an onboarding session with all the supervisors before the students start, setting some expectations, also talking to them about what makes a good experience for a student and the things that they should be doing. So I think that particularly helps from a generalised student perspective. More specifically, I think if we looked at the Career Trackers program, that in itself has its own benefits, with the Career Trackers program supporting the students themselves as well, and connecting them up with a cohort again of people from that Career Trackers alumni support network. Because there's certain things that we can do, but there's also other things that we cannot do to kind of help them feel supported, and that's across a multitude of diversity areas for us.
Wonderful, thank you. I've got more questions, but what I might do is actually open it up to our other people joining us. So yeah, I encourage you turn your cameras on. And does anyone first have any questions for Kim, or do you have any other practical examples yourselves to share? And I've got a question lined up ready to go, but I think other people, yeah. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share or ask? No one's jumping in. Oh, so if I mentioned, oh sorry, Kendall, did you?
I'm just jumping in, trying to start the bandwagon.
Jumping in. I mentioned, so I talked in my introduction of the research that was done by Sally Mail and others, and in a previous role I was involved a lot with the Australian Council of Engineering Deans, who invest a lot of time in looking at diversity and inclusion in engineering students. And one of the practical things in Sally's research, they identified some specific risks for female students, but again, that could apply to others, and some specific solutions. And an example would be, sort of, you could almost say classic examples of assumptions that a female student would not be interested in going to a particular site tour or not doing a particular activity because of the hours that it was happening, or it was, a dirty, messy type activity. And of course, that was certainly not a gender-related issue, but assumptions being made. Or also in other challenges, a risk of, say, male staff being hesitant to go on a long car journey with a young female student, and just thinking the issue's a bit too complicated to deal with, so I just won't extend that invitation. And that's where some of the suggested actions were, as you say, meeting with your supervisors beforehand to actually identify some of these potential misconceptions, these unconscious biases, but also practical actions such as buddying up female students, or other, so that you don't have that potential, perceived risk of being alone with students, even though they're young adults. It was a perceived risk. So buddy up the students and the like. So, and that's taking a specific action to address a specific risk. Are there any examples of that sort of thing that you're doing to support female students or others?
I don't think specifically students, David, and the reason why I think not specifically students, because those sorts of things that you mentioned are not student specific. It's gender specific in an industry like ours. So there's probably more broader actions that our organisation's taken prior to getting that point. And, you know, it is even down to the point of, I can give an example that was shared with me by a female engineer that's been in our organisation for quite some time, was a graduate. We were talking about graduates going on field rotations in some of our substations that have been around for a long time. There was the facilities when it comes to the amenities were very male specific, and you know that was just that was a historical thing, and so there's been a lot of work that's happened in relation to getting sort of those sorts of things. So I think for us it's more been an organisational thing rather than a student thing, and a lot of those elements, practical elements like that would apply, even down to things like our PPE. I know we've made some significant changes in our PPE that allows and trials it with females and males and you know, people in the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state to capture the diverse, obviously, body types, and we have, you know, those small actions so. Other than kind of just the usual things we do with our program, I think there's probably broader things we've been doing as an organisation that touch on a lot of that already, David.
Yeah, and I think that's, I suppose, one of the purposes for this session is, you know, we find that across the breadth of the API's community is that particularly, say, smaller organisations, they haven't had that, I suppose, that breadth of diversity. They haven't had the scale and resourcing to cover off on these things. So even identifying those practical things that you've addressed, like PPE is a classic. It can really make people feel, you know, welcome and included, or not really meant to belong here, and even not feeling particularly professional when you feel like you're, you know, wearing your dad's overalls of any gender, that, you know, you just don't feel like it's your place, and that's one of those really subtle impacts that can come from a student placement, that when we're building all of this effort to get a more diverse cohort of students into the power sector, it can be little things that trip us up. So I think identifying, even as you've listed those sort of practical things, toilets, PPE, they're all important things in the experience that a student has. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. Also, I'll go back to our participants. We've got Ben and Brock and Kathy and Matthew and Sebastian and Stuart. A question I would put to, you know, even our, you know, male participants who might not feel that diversity is an issue that directly impacts them, but you've been in workplaces. Does anyone have any examples of experiences where they've seen positive actions that have helped the whole cohort? Like, as Liz says, bringing together everyone and making sure they feel part of the team is really positive for everyone. So, yeah. Any thoughts? People are very quiet out here.
Yeah, Chris, Ben Lang here from Ausgroup.
Hi, Ben. Great to have you with us.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think really, I think there were two things that were jump into mind in terms of positive impacts when it comes to setting up positive work placements. One is the, you know, overall in the large banner of preparation and finding the right people to match up those students with, to be sort of the mentor in the organisation, or the person to show them around, or embed them into their section. They might not necessarily work in the section that they're being placed in, but, you know, they're a person that they can go see regularly and ask questions, you know, independently and safely, and you know, and someone that's very competent to handle those very different types of questions or views or backgrounds. And the other part is sometimes in the past we've set up work placements with a common objective for all of the student cohorts or those participants to come into the organisation to work and achieve. So it might be, get an experience, get a breadth of the organisation, and see how your engineering degree can turn into something practical as a career. But sometimes sometimes for certain individuals, we got to probably look at those other unique objectives that might be applicable to them and individualize it to them. So, for some people, it might be just about actually seeing that they could possibly, work in the organization, or they've seen another female or another person likened to themselves working in that workplace. And, come back to a bit more of the basics around what, stepping through inclusion and diversity means. Seeing another individual that has a disability like them or different to them working in that. So I think sometimes, in the past we've set up those broad objectives and we don't actually achieve those stepping stones or those little stepping stones enough, unless we consider what those individual stepping stones might be for that individual case. Yeah, that were my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And also, so in terms of some great ideas there. I was going to comment that, so we've been working with career trackers where, as part of their program with the interns when they're placed in organisations, they have a series. They have an initial set of meetings, and they set up learning objectives and activity plan and the like for that placement. And Liz has done that with career trackers. And they've been doing this for 10 years, so they're really good at it. So we've picked up, with their support, their model and added a couple of tweaks that are, I suppose, more power sector specific, but also in that sense of it's great practice, but let's also generalize that. So it's not unique to a particular cohort of intern, but let's actually generalize that experience. And some of the things that we're talking with career trackers and have included is things like, every student should go and have a discussion with HR about, what are the culture and behaviour policies within the organisation, not in that here's the rules, but more in that, the positive, how does that organisation support a diverse community, diverse culture, etc. So, you tell them we have a pride committee and we have this committee and we have this committee, rather than identifying, you fit in this particular niche, we'll tell you about that, actually telling everyone about everything, but also, as you've said, Ben, identifying that for particular individuals, you really do want to make sure that they're aware that, there is someone that can help them understand the specific resources for disability access, or other types of things as well. So, but Liz, Kim, did you have any ideas on, because you've worked with that handbook from career trackers?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Ben, and I like that sort of thought around the common objectives. We do with our students sort of like a hackathon. There's a business problem that they're given, and they do come together, and like in each of the locations, they may not have been working with each other, but they do a bit of a hackathon. So that's a nice way to bring them all together and make them sort of from an inclusion perspective. But just back on the career trackers more specifically, we do look at the individuals and their specific needs and also their interests in order for it to be successful. So one of our first career trackers intern, he was a mechanical engineer, and it's not necessarily a big part of our organisation, mechanical engineering, but when we got to speaking with him, and what we worked out is that he was actually from up far north Queensland, and he's more with the Tagalaka peoples, and who were on a remote or an isolated network. So when it come to finding a project for him, connecting him with that project ended up being a really great opportunity to connect him back to his community, his country, and a passion area of his. But we also got the benefit of him for that experience, which then led for his next placement with us when he joined us the second time. He got to go up again, almost continue that project a year later in its next phase, and go up to Bamaga and stuff like that. So I think whilst it can be hard to manage 30 to 40, where you, like Ben says, where you do have that sort of, there's some specific individuals you might need to put a few little practical additions in there to further support them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Ben. Some really great ideas there. Any other, I suppose, suggestions or ideas, comments to share from people?
I have a question, David, if I could.
Absolutely.
Ben spoke a little bit on advice, or I'm sorry, my name's Kendall. I'm the operations manager with Australian Power Institute. Thanks, Kim and Ben, for your comments and insights. I think that Ben's spoken a lot about tips and tricks and strategies for supporting students while on placement and while working within our organizations. And Kim's spoken about, I guess, prior and during. I guess one of the challenges that I see a lot from speaking with API member companies and other companies in general, they have a genuine passion and intent for increasing their employee base, and they really want to diversify. And sometimes that's a little bit of a shock when it's trickier than what they expect. Sometimes we're used to our timelines, our vacation work, our graduate intake, and that pipeline. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to shift outside of those strategies. I just wanted to ask him, like, she said that she made some adjustments with Ashley in terms of being more open-minded. He was a mechanical. On paper, it wasn't so well suited, but they had a conversation and realized it was going to be great and reciprocal benefit for both sides. In terms of recruitment, Kim, where have you and EQ's team had to expand your net and I guess defer from your original strategy in order to start that support from maybe a younger cohort? Or
I think building the pipeline takes a bit of time. So probably just to highlight something that you had sort of alluded to, Kendall, like it is although we've been signed up for the Career Trackers program and we've got 3 interns that have joined us this year, we're not probably going to see any sort of outcomes of that effort for probably another 3 years. Like this, we're about to go in another recruitment cycle. Grad season's about to happen. The numbers of females and First Nations and also regional, because regional is a big thing for us, may not have jumped significantly just because we've had 3 Career Trackers interns. It's a long game for us. When it comes to our recruitment practices, though, like we do look for opportunities to kind of not just sort of academic scoring. We're looking at the whole person, and when you're looking at a couple of hundred applications, it can be a little bit hard. So we've actually been using last year, and we'll use it again this year, a tool that is a shortlisting tool called Grad Sift, Australian product. It's just been really helpful for us because it puts a bit of AI over the top, and it looks at a candidate based on you can almost blind shortlist, so but look at their academic scoring, their experience, and also their extracurricular. So you're looking at a bit of a whole person. So there's some things in our process that we've done, and also at a shortlisting stage where we will particular targeted areas that we'll look at a little bit more closely and kind of push them forward through that process and make sure that our process steps are actually inclusive as they are as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a practical tip that maybe organizations could pick up if they're not already using software like that already. I guess just to expand on that, I think sometimes organizations are really keen and hungry for that instant ROI or that stat, and they're so excited to get these either females or First Nations people in, that sometimes when they don't see the answer right away, it's almost like those people aren't out there, they don't exist type thing, and we'll wait till they come through. But that's not actually the case. I think there's many reports, and I really wish Hannah Turnbull from Career Trackers is here, because she's got amazing stats and stories about the importance of supporting, especially First Nations people, earlier on, as they've got different factors in terms of their lifestyle, living, family support, educational barriers, things like that, regional barriers, that there's a gap in between when they're younger in their education through to high school, which causes a barrier then to university, and then they're not right on the map for these industry organizations that really want to bring them in. So what can we do as an industry and employers to reach them earlier and support them earlier? I know you have a great story with Galara, if you could share any insights around that.
Yeah. I think what if I was to summarise it really quickly, and I will go into more detail, but I think it's there are established organisations that do it really well, and it's about tapping into those organisations like Career Trackers and others that are already doing great work in this space, and see how us as an industry and organisation can do that. Because if we try to do it ourselves, it's not, we're probably 10 years behind where those groups are already. So Galara, who she joined us in Cairns this year, just for 5-week placement. So she's not yet started university, but she had been through one of Career Trackers partner organisations, CSIRO, First Nation Girls in STEM. So it is a specific targeted program that looks to support the students through, like the female Indigenous students through high school, all the way through high school. And then when they get to that year 12 is where they start to then engage them with Career Trackers. So it's about, like you say, Kendall, it's the long game. It's working, and she's from Mariba, which is out further outside of Cairns on a cattle station near the Emerald Wind Farm. And so Gullah has been through that sort of pipeline or that program, and then she's now hit year 12, now joined Career Trackers, and now had the opportunity to join us. So she joined us for 5 weeks. So it wasn't a traditional 3-month placement or 90-day placement like we would normally have for other students, but it gives us an opportunity to give Gullah a taste of what life is like and what she can achieve, and also kind of that inspiration. Because one of the things that somebody had said to me once was, I remember when I first walked into the building in Rockhampton, I went in an elevator, and I've never been in an elevator, and that moment stood out for me in my life, because I grew up in central West Queensland in an Indigenous community, and the excitement of a lift and that moment is a pivotal moment for them as well. So really long explanation, but I think is tapping into the organisations that do it really well and are the best in the business in that.
Yeah, and also loosening your expectations.
Yeah.
And by doing so and you were able to create a smaller, more tailored work experience for Galara, as opposed to the other interns, to help support her and make it appropriate for her. And last little plug, and then I'll hand it back to you, David, but Galara made an awesome video, part of the summit, and you can all, if you haven't already, log in and access her video. It's under 5 minutes, and she made this amazing video on for high school students as well, about careers in the power sector and why it's so exciting to be an engineer. And for a high school student, I mean, it was amazing. I learned from the video. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't already done so. And
Absolutely. And that, again, probably loops back to what we like. I think, David, you said you can't be what you can't see. So we really wanted to get Gullah's perspective as a student. So we're trying to engage high school students, but we're not high school students, unfortunately. It's a while ago since I went to high school. But yeah, engaging back with getting them to tell us and tell the story, so that the students, or high school and university students, can specifically relate to those individuals. And a really great outcome of the story there with Gullah is her supervisor, and I'll send you the photos as well, David. She was her connection with community. She actually got her family to do artistry on a boomerang for her supervisor, and it's a replica of one of the arts that they had done at the Mareeba Airport. So yeah, it was really cool story.
Wonderful, thank you. No, it's and so for everyone's reference, I've popped the link to Gallera's video in the chat there. So if you're registered in the summit, you can jump onto that. But I see that Ben has his hand up. Please, Ben.
Yeah, sorry. I hope I'm not being too noisy in this.
No, absolutely. No, please.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely what Kim said. When you have that experience, when you are very passionate, you want to get someone in, and unfortunately, we've set up a bursary or a cadetship, and out there for someone to apply, and you get no applicants. That becomes a bit disheartening. And it is that cause to go, okay, well, where's the next logical step in the piece to go looking for the answers? And totally support Kim. Yeah, look at those organisations that do it well. I sit on the board of Engineering Aid Australia, which we run 2 engineering summer schools across the country, one in the west and one in the east yearly. But there's other organisations that have and foundations that do very similar work with the universities as well. And they're all about really catching the eye and the interest and speaking to those kids at the school level. I think that is the next great challenge that we've got. Career Trackers does very good at grabbing that cohort that have navigated high school successfully. But we've got to really start looking at appealing to high school students, especially those of minority groups, and making our workplaces or our jobs or our personas attractive to them. And it is a challenge, and it's but if it means good business, then that investment of time and energy will really make something fruitful in the decades to come. The other part of it as well is that passion's really good, but I think there's a behaviour as well that we should be encouraging each other to do in the organisations. That's to be really unapologetic when it comes to inclusion and diversity initiatives and efforts. None of these things where we put it in place or sponsor or participate in or support verbally should be under question. They should be fully supported and really unapologetic about what we do. So I think that's one thing to highlight in our behaviours as organisations, that we don't shy away from it. We're unapologetic about being into it. And and the other part is really that looking for opportunities to collaborate as well. It might not be with the power sector. There may be a cross collaboration between us. I don't know, please mute the line on me if I'm talking out of speak here with the API's objectives, but maybe there is those cross collaborations between our colleagues in the water sector or the gas sector, the other energy sectors. There's plenty of opportunities where we can really do this well if we collaborate and joint efforts, rather than looking at our own barriers and our own competitions to meet targets or do something that's inclusion diversity target or that's me. So
No, thank you. And that's, I suppose, for me, and I'm just keeping an eye on the time of wrapping it up. I think there's been some great practical ideas here of sort of the challenge of when we get the very, by definition, minority cohorts that we're targeting to come into our organisations. When we can get them in as summer placements, there's a real responsibility to make sure that they have a genuine, authentic, meaningful and inclusive experience. And there's some practical things that everyone can do. But there's also the pipeline challenge of making sure that we're connecting in that way. And as we say, working, as Kim says, working with partners who are really strong in that area is a great approach. And there's also probably some process improvements and refinements that we can make to make sure that our systems aren't aggressively filtering out the very outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. And I know, even within the API's bursary program, it's a challenge we look at. If you've got the timeline and you've got to move forward, but if you're not getting sort of the diversity of applicants, how do you approach getting more diversity in your cohort and then making that choice? So there's a lot of different things we can do. From our perspective, there's some great practical lessons we can draw out of this and some great things that we can share with our other members. And just to your last point, Ben, it is something that we've been at the end of 2020, there was a conference on power engineering academics that the API supported, and diversity was a key issue there. And one of the questions was what other sectors or organisations are doing this better or really well that we can learn from and partner with. And an example would be, say, BHP. They're doing better than the power sector in this space. So we're actively looking at that as well, and we will have more of these types of discussions, and I'm planning to bring in some of those other sectors who are have some wisdom to share with us, or for us to partner with them to move forward. And Career Trackers is a second attempt of partnering that we've made. We've also been working with the Go Foundation from an Indigenous perspective. We also work with women in engineering programs, and we've been talking about working with some other diversity programs such as neuro-linguistic diversity and the like. So finding those ways. But just to draw it back to the summit, one of the great positives we see from the summit is we've now got 30 odd inspiring short fun videos from young power sector students that show the breadth of diversity and creativity in our student community, but we can also use them as resources to show to other young people and not young people what an experience in the power sector can look like for them in a really relatable way. So we'll be building on this. To be honest, the videos are better than I'd hoped. They're pretty amazing, some of them. So it's great to see what we've got from our students. So yeah, but I suppose just looking at the time, I'm going to wrap things up. Does anyone have anything that they're keen to share before we close? All right, everyone's happy. All righty. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to Kim for taking the time to both, prepare and think about what you'd share, and for sharing so many interesting things with us today. Energy Queensland is a really important partner for the API. They both are one of our governor members and on the board, but also they're a direct supporter of a number of our other initiatives, such as our support for the UQ Women in Engineering program and a leadership development award that we have for bursary students called the TJ Efney Award. So it's always a pleasure to work with Kim and her colleagues and the rest of the team in supporting developing our diverse future workforce. So thank you very much, Kim. It's great. And thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone else that's joined us today. And thanks, Kendall, for pulling together another great session of people. It's been fantastic.